Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Gronich of Statewide News Service, jbiztechholy.com, and now columnist for the Jewish Press.
I'm having a lot of fun doing all of that, and my column in the Jewish Press talks about how government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. And one of the things that goes on in government is about Pet Advocacy Day.
Oh, really?
And one of the people who's our guest now is Brad Shear, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Mohawk Hudson Humane Society in Menands. So welcome to the Jewish View. It's great to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So what's going on with animal advocacy these days?
Well, there's been a lot of work on animal advocacy this past legislative session. Not a lot of success as far as the legislature goes.
Well, what are the issues that you're looking for?
You know, New York State has some outdated animal cruelty protections. We have the oldest animal cruelty laws in the country. We were the first state in the nation to protect animals. But
what year was that about?
That was in the 1860s.
Well, 150 years.
The Civil War
sure.
era.
Unfortunately, pieces of those laws are still on the books today.
Well, what would be wrong with them? I mean,
we haven't really modernized them. So when you look at those laws, some of the terminology I think is confusing today. It's a little too general. We'd like to be more specific. There are terms like overriding or overdriving that were meant for horses. Horses were the first animals meant to be protected. Everybody had horses, right? We didn't really have cars. So there were concerns about how horses
was too much.
They were literally dying in the streets in New York
Really?
City. Sure. And how could we protect them? So those now, more people own companion animals than ever. We think about them differently than we did 150 years ago, and there are different kinds of protections.
Not work animals, they're pet animals.
Correct.
But something, I don't know, I mean, that you hear on the news and the media, a person was cruel to their animals, there's 20 cats in one house, and I didn't sit there investigating, and they're going to give these people a lot of years in jail for that.
Well,
so it seems like there are laws in place against cruelty to animals.
Rarely do people actually do jail time for these offenses, and most of those offenses are misdemeanors. And if they do rise to the level of a felony, we do have a felony animal cruelty provision in New York State law. The level of penalty felonies are there's A felony through E felony, A being the worst, and E having the least penalties. The animal cruelty felony is unclassified, which means the penalties are lower than an E. They're the least, the lowest penalties you can have and still have a felony.
So what laws are you looking to change? Would that be one of your laws?
Yeah, certainly increasing the penalties and the amount of time before a person can own a pet again. So right now, if you could be convicted of felony animal cruelty and in a few years get pets again if you're off probation. So we certainly want to extend the amount of time before people can have them again. We want better protections for animals left outside. Right now, if you leave your dog outside, for example, it's 10 below and there's no shelter, it's a $50 fine, which we think is far too low. It's cheaper to pay the $50 fine than it is to buy a doghouse. So you financially, you're better off not complying.
Just because we are on the Jewish View, of course, as our viewers do know. So we wanted to put the Jewish opinion of, because you say 150 years ago, I always say put in perspective that even New York was the first 150 years ago.
Right.
Here you're talking about Judaism 3,000 years ago that literally had rules about, it's called in Hebrew, tsar bali chaim, the paining an animal.
Right.
That it even says that if you're hungry, and like you said, nowadays maybe you have a cute pet, but in those days you had cattle, you had different obviously work animals, and it said that you have to feed your animals before you feed yourself. And so these are, I mean, it's so advanced, it's incredible to me, so progressive. I'm talking 100 years ago compared to thousands of years ago, and even today in these backward countries, they don't really even care about animals. So just Judaism, I always put a pitch in, is really on the cutting edge of really the most liberal and humane form of society, caring about animals.
And they also say that animal abuse is a gateway crime to people abuse.
What we see is that people who are violent tend to be violent toward whoever or whatever is close to them and weaker than them. So when you see, for example, young children who have real issues that are violent, they're often violent toward the family pet because they're the only thing in the house weaker than them. Now those kids
Except the pit bull.
right, well, in some cases. Now those kids, if there isn't intervention, can become very seriously violent adults. And the latest research really tells us that it's not so much that you start with animals and you progress to people or kids. It's all the same. These are people who don't have self-control, who have violent tendencies. One day it might be the dog, the next day it's going to be a spouse, the next day it's going to be a kid. And they're all mixed together to the same people. So when one of the reasons that we want, one of our arguments for increasing penalties for animal abuse is you are protecting people from that same person. These are the same people.
Interesting.
And in Albany County, the district attorney prosecutes animal crimes out of their special victims unit. So the special victims being elder abuse, sex crimes, domestic violence, and in this case, animal abuse. And those prosecutors tell us they're seeing the same people
Really?
committing
That's
those
interesting.
crimes.
Gee, on all the years I'm watching Law and Order SVU,
Yeah.
they never did an animal.
That's-
No, they haven't done it on TV. And New York City, I don't think New York City has gotten there yet, but there are a couple of district attorney's office throughout the state that have started doing that process, having special prosecutors just for animal crimes because they
Mark,
see that
permit me
connection.
another mission over here,
Yeah.
for our video. It is the Jewish view. But no, I just was learning recently, it was incredible to me. Usually, of course, animals are important, but in Judaism, human beings overrides if there ever is an overriding. For example, if an animal, making a long story short, animal hurts a human being or kills a human being, that animal has to be destroyed. It is not worthy of its life. So now the question is, what if they call it, it's interesting, this is 2,000 years ago it's written, an animal, an ox, a shore, a bull, like is there bullfighting of an arena, that's how they call it. So it must be around the Romans that they had it, I don't know. Roman culture, I know from the Talmud more than I know from history. But they had bullfighting, didn't come out of nowhere. So it says that what if, and we just recently had that a bull, they tease it and they poke it and, it's disgusting really. But in any case, people like it. Bullfighting, and the bull wins and they kill the bullfighter.
Right.
Now the question is, well, you just said the bull kills a human being.
Right.
But since it was teased, the Mishnah says this, the Talmud, that it says since it was teased to do this, it's all right. You don't have to kill the animal.
But in Spain, when they do the running of the bulls, or they have the thing, I just learned this because it just happened where a matador was gored by a bull, and you just don't kill, they kill the bull, but they also kill the mother of the bull.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that the mother wouldn't breed any other
Wild animals.
any other bull. So
That's
whatever.
interesting.
Yeah.
So that's,
Well, I mean,
again,
so-
it's not
Even though the
Torah
mother of
perspective.
the mother of this
Not
bull
a-
had nothing to do with it, but they do
Yeah.
that as
Interesting.
an omen,
Yeah.
or whatever.
So provisions
Anyway.
like that survive today
Yes.
into law regulating aggressive animals. So if a dog bites you, there are regulations around that. Severe bites, animals sometimes get put down, but there are provisions. So if you were, let's say, if I come to your house and I'm attacking you and the dog comes and bites me, the dog is not going to be destroyed in that case. Or if I do something to the animal and the animal bites me. So, I mean, those similar provisions are actually in
That's
our modern
interesting.
dangerous dog laws in New York State.
Well, you can't really have corroborating evidence or
Yeah.
corroborating statements
Right.
because the dog can't speak.
Yeah.
But I'm sure
But
there's
hopefully
other
other-
ways of finding
Sure.
finding these
Yeah.
things out.
I wanted to ask a question because they say that they don't like to breed dogs so much because then there's not enough owners. That kind of idea. There's not enough owners for dogs and cats.
Right.
So that's why, in a way, they say it's a little bit of a good thing.
My father has when May rest in peace, had a wonderful story.
All right.
When he was growing up in Brooklyn, he had I think a Doberman Pinscher. They're very loyal. And he had to give the dog away. It was too big for their small home. So they gave the dog away, and several years later, he's happens to be walking down the block, and the dog recognized him
Yeah.
and jumped the fence and went over to lick him
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
be a part of
Yeah.
him. He missed him that much. Dogs
Yeah.
have that sense.
We've been living with dogs for 10,000 years. And there's no getting around the connection that humans have to animals, to companion animals, and thousands of years with cats as well. So we really grew together, and the bond is important. And when it's strong, it helps both of us.
Are you more of a dog or a cat person?
I like both. Right now, I have 3 cats. I don't have a dog at this point, but
Okay.
I've had dogs for more of my life than I've had cats. But it's, for me, they're just they're very different, and I enjoy both of them.
And you have family, kids and stuff? Or,
Yeah, 2 kids, 2 small kids.
So they
So
get along fine, no problem?
they get along well, and the kids, we teach from a young age how to treat the animals properly. So, it's not necessarily natural, and I think for kids, especially as they grow, don't realize how strong they are and compare. They're not used to being stronger than anything. So they get 3 or 4 years old, if they're pulling on the cat or pulling on the dog's tail, to the animal, if it's a small animal especially, they're strong, and it can hurt. They can start hurting them when they were smaller. Maybe it didn't. So you got to keep, like with everything with kids, you have to keep teaching them as they grow, and keep reinforcing.
So when you watch The Price is Right for decades,
Yeah.
at the end of The Price is Right, they say, have your pet spayed or neutered?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's spayed, right? Not spayed?
Spay here.
Spayed, right?
Yeah.
So why do they keep saying, why is that such a big thing to have dogs and
Well,
pets
as you mentioned, there are just so many dogs and cats being bred accidentally, being bred sometimes on purpose, that organizations like ours can be overwhelmed with the number of animals that are unwanted. We have tremendous success finding homes for them, but it adds to a system that's already overwhelmed. So if you have a litter of 8 kittens, those 8 kittens have to go somewhere. And where are they going to go? You can have one litter, and maybe you can find 8 people to take them. But what if that cat has another litter of 8 kittens? Where's the next one going to go? Do you have 16 friends who all want kittens? You're probably going to have to then get them into a system
So
like
your
ours.
organization takes care of all these animals? If like someone
Yeah.
has a litter, like you just 8 cats, hey, I don't want 8 cats, I just want my 1 cat.
Right.
Here, you take them.
So we would take those kittens. We would also offer to spay the mother cat for you, so that you stop having litter. So obviously, if you're bringing us 8 kittens, you have a situation where the cat is getting pregnant, and it could happen again. So we want to prevent that from happening again,
So you
to
do
limit
that
the
for
stress
free?
on the system. In some cases, we do as low as free. So it depends on your income. But in a case like that, where we know this cat's already had kittens and more are probably coming, we do whatever we can
Because
to get
it's
them spayed.
expensive to neuter a cat.
Yeah. So-
It's like $500 or something.
Really?
It can, yeah, so it varies
operation.
tremendously, sure. Yeah, spay is for the females is more expensive than a neuter for the males, because the procedures are very different and easier, and that takes less time. But we have programs that are income based. So the lower your income, the less expensive it is.
I had a kitten for a while, and I get to the point where he was 6 months old, and I had to figure out whether I was going to spend the $500 or give the cat away, and I gave the cat away.
That's an interesting
Because I
point,
wasn't
because
gonna-
I'm friends with everybody, but I'm friends with a veterinarian. Me, when I see him, I say, hey, how's business? But he's not in Albany, but he's a little bit farther out, more of a depressed area around in the exurbs, really out
Talking
there.
about Waynesburg?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and, so he says, well, it's not so good. I said, what's up? He takes care of dogs and cats. He says, it is like, I guess you were saying, I didn't know how much money it cost, but I don't know, you can talk about shots also. People, it's like you think dog and cats, but the first thing that goes, you don't need a dog and cat.
Right.
Obviously, it's expendable that, get rid of them, or, like that, they get sick, almost like what you were saying. All right, goodbye, I don't need this over
Yeah.
here.
Right.
Pay money to heal a dog cat when I'm, don't have too much money. So I'm not worried about his business, but I mean, I'd like him to have good business, but, I feel bad for the animal, where they say, hey, goodbye and good luck, you get sick, and,
Yeah, and
throw
what-
them out in the street.
What we're really working towards doing is creating programs that help people keep animals in their homes. So whether that's getting them spayed or neutered, or getting them pet food they need. We distribute pet food to 7 food pantries around the capital region, and people can actually get food
Oh,
from
that's
us.
interesting.
So what we heard from some of the food pantries was that people were taking human food from the food pantries to feed their pets,
Yeah.
because they didn't have any source of food. So when we give them pet food, the pets get the proper food, and there's more food on the shelves for the people.
That's
Yeah, but the
And-
people sometimes eat the pet food too.
Do they, you found that?
Well, they're going to a food pantry, so hopefully they're taking the human food and eating
Yeah,
it themselves.
But I've heard of these cases where
Yeah.
people really like cat food. I don't know what's in it.
If that's if that's how they're, our intent is, of course, for it to be fed to the
Okay.
animals and help them just maintain the animals in
I
their
was
home.
surprised in this area, they mentioned veterinarians, there are like 4 or 5 Jewish veterinarians in this area.
We have quite a lot of veterans.
Kornroth,
Sure.
there's the guy in
Taxir.
Twain'sville, what's his
Yeah,
name?
Taxir.
Taxir, right. And then there's a guy in Schenectady,
Mhm.
Niskuna
Yeah.
vet.
Listen,
Well,
everybody, mother
Doctor-
wants their son to be a doctor.
Right,
Doctor,
right. Dr. Estra in Delmar.
Yeah.
Dr. Who?
Estra
Estra.
in Delmar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure,
I have
right
to
by
add
you.
that to my
Yeah,
list.
yeah, you have to add her. Yeah.
I have a website, jbiztechvalley.com,
Okay.
so it's an online directory
Okay.
of all the Jewish, and so I'm going to add you too, because you just
Okay.
told us that
Great.
you're Jewish.
Yeah.
I didn't know, so, that's the thing, you don't know until you
How do you
ask.
get funded?
Yeah.
Talk about your organization.
Most of our funding is private donors, individuals mostly.
Nothing
And-
government?
Really, no. The only place where there's some government funding is on every dog license that's sold in New York State. There's a $1 surcharge that goes into a fund to subsidize spay and neuter throughout the state. We get a little bit of money to subsidize spay and neuter
So
through that
what's your
fund,
budget,
but that's
annual
it.
budget?
It's just under $3 million.
Wow, that's a lot.
Pretty cool.
Yeah,
Huh?
some-
Is that, you need more, or is that something, I mean, you always need more.
The more we can get, the more we can do. Right? So programs like that, the more we can get funding, the cheaper spay and neuter becomes,
Now,
the
you
more
have
animals we
the-
can help.
The president of your board
Mhm.
is Jewish, Miguel
He is
Berger.
Miguel Berger, sure.
Yeah,
yeah.
of Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate Tech Valley.
He
We've got
sure
your
is.
plug, shameless
Yeah,
plug.
That's
you know,
right.
so,
Yeah.
hopefully he'll watch this. But I got to ask you about, when you go back to the laws and stuff, I often take requests for questions, so.
Mhm.
But are shelters governed by regulations that are determined by New York State?
It depends on the shelter. In our case, we contract with 16 municipalities in Albany and Rensselaer County to be their municipal animal shelter. Every municipality is required to have an animal shelter or contract with one. So because of those contracts, because we're a municipal shelter, we're inspected by the State Agriculture and Markets Department and regulated by them.
You wouldn't
If
think
we
it
did
would be
not,
Ag and Markets, you would think it would be Department of State or something.
you would think it would be Department of State. I think a lot of animal-related regulation is in Ag and Markets law because they employ a lot of veterinarians and they employ a lot of veterinary technicians really to work on the large animal side. But the same, so the same
For the
person,
cows, you mean?
same person who comes and inspects us will the same day might go to an egg farm or a cattle farm, a dairy. But they're inspecting us one day and inspecting a dairy the next day.
So how often do they come? I mean, they can't have too many people around the state to inspect.
No, they inspect a minimum of once a year.
Really?
And
Really?
if
Get
they,
around?
yeah, so if there are issues or complaints, they'll do extra inspections.
So these rescue groups, are they governed also?
No,
They're not governed at all.
No, there's no regulation of those groups.
Do they need to be?
I think in some cases, there's a lot of groups doing very good work. I think there are a lot of, but I personally, I think if you're doing a good job, if you're doing everything that you should be doing, then having someone come in and take a look at what you're doing isn't a big deal. For us, they show up, they walk through, they ask us for some paperwork, we hand it over, everything's fine.
But-
So if you're doing good work, it's not an issue.
But do they make their own rules and regulations, these rescue groups?
Yeah, they're usually a nonprofit organization, so they're regulated by the Attorney General, who regulates nonprofits as any other nonprofit. But in terms of any animal care or transactions around animals, there's no regulation. So there's the cruelty laws, but that's really it. There's no regulation of their facilities or.
We regulate everything else, but we don't regulate these rescue groups?
I know we found something in New York State that's not regulated.
Well,
It's an
because-
incredible achievement.
Well, it's not so much that as they don't always work in the best interest of the pets. I mean,
Why do you say?
well, because when we went to this one group, and they asked us if,
You mean to adopt a pet?
to adopt a pet, and they said, do you keep will the dog be leashed? Well, if you have an enclosed backyard, you don't need to leash the dog in a fully enclosed backyard. And they said, oh no, the dog has to be on leash all the time. And they didn't say that, otherwise we would have said, okay, if that's one of your rules, then we'll abide by it. They were like sort of setting us up and asking, would the dog be on the leash all the time? So we answered truthfully, only in the enclosed area. That would be fully enclosed, and they said, no, you can't adopt a dog.
So
And
I think
that really
that's
is upsetting.
and I think there are a lot of people who are put off by those kinds of methods of trying to do adoption. So we are much more open about our adoptions. We find homes for last year over 3,800 animals. So by far the number one source of animals in the capital region. And the way we do it is just trying to get to know you, get to know the animals, and trying to make a good match. And once that good match is made, and we feel, and there's a bond between you and the animal, you're going to do whatever it takes to take care of them, whether it's going to be on a leash or not on a leash. I mean, I remember I was counseling a guy years ago before I was in charge, and the guy said, the dog's going to be outside all the time. And we said, well, we don't really like dogs to be outside all the time, but I talked to him, I didn't shut it down. And he said, well, what I do is I lead outdoor adventure camps. So I take adults out into the country, so I'm outside all the time. I live in all summer long. I'm in a tent. And the dog's going to come with me on hikes, and I have a thing that attaches his leash to my belt, and it was a perfect dog for that kind of. He was a very high energy dog, perfect dog for that. And the guy, the guy and the dog were a great match. But if you don't ask the next question, like, oh, you're going to let him off leash, and they don't say, well, is it in a fenced area? Then they've lost an opportunity.
Right, exactly.
Right? And we want to make sure we understand. We don't want anybody to be cruel to an animal or abandon them or not take care of them. So we're trying to avoid that. But other than that, we just want you and the animal to get along.
Well, I always say dogs and cats. Do you have any interesting stories of some other
Rabbits.
animals that you take
We
care
get
of?
rabbits are the third most common animal we get. We'll get between anywhere from 50 to 100
multiply like
rabbits a year.
rabbits.
Yeah, that's right. We spay or neuter them too, because you do get they'll just keep going. And but we get reptiles and bird. We had a bird in
Really?
recently, and pretty much anything that can fit inside your house.
And you're a no-kill shelter. I think that's important.
We don't use that term. So the term, that again, you talk about regulation. There's
It's an old term.
Yeah,
I'm old. That's why it's an old term.
There's just no common definition of what that means. So
Well, it
the
means
shelter.
that you try not to euthanize the animal.
Right, so we only euthanize animals that are aggressive, that we think are a danger to the community, or that are so ill that they can't be treated. So a lot of people would call that no kill, but really some animals are being euthanized. So I feel like the term is just not a, we like to talk about the details of language, right?
Well,
that's we talk a lot about, so to me it's just inaccurate to say there's no at any shelter, any of the shelters using that terminology. It's just not true that there's
You
no
always have a
euthanasia.
vet on staff. I mean, for example, to analyze the too sick. Yes.
Yeah, so working for us, we have a full-time veterinarian and 3 part-time veterinarians.
Really?
Between 2 locations, so in Manans, and then we have a location up in Wilton that has a spay-neuter clinic and little adoption clinic.
And where's the third one? Or is it just the two?
That's the 2 locations
Manans.
where we have veterinarians, and then inside the PetSmart in Latham Farms, we have about 2,000 square feet of that store where we have staff all the time. That's just an adoption center.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay, so how do you publicize that if I didn't know that?
We do the best we can. Well, I guess some people are finding out because we're doing so many adoptions, but they're all on our website to see where you can go.
Now, you recently got a van to help local shelters provide vet services to abused animals?
Yeah. So the primary purpose for the vehicle is to serve as a response vehicle for cruelty investigations.
Yeah.
It's essentially a mobile veterinary exam room. So you can go in there just like you take your dog to the veterinarian, and they have equipment in the exam room, an exam table and lights and stethoscopes and clippers and all that.
So how much was that? To outfit all that?
For us, the vehicle itself was paid for by the District Attorney's office in Albany, and then we raised $25,000 to outfit it with all the equipment that we needed.
So the DA's office took it, from drug money to purchase this?
Yeah, so seized assets, I think they call it, right? So
Okay.
when they seize cash and drug money, then they can use it for different law enforcement purposes, and this is one of them.
Why is this one of them?
Well, we are, so our agency is actually a law enforcement agency where we are an SPCA. We can commission law enforcement officers in Albany and Rensselaer counties. So there's a system in New York that we don't have in every state where you can incorporate an SPCA in a county, and that SPCA can then commission law enforcement officers to enforce the cruelty laws. So if you've ever seen the cop shows, the animal cops, we are the animal cops for Albany and Rensselaer counties.
But the animal control officers, the ACOs in each town, aren't they officers also?
The ACOs cannot enforce the animal cruelty law. They enforce the dog license law, dangerous dog laws, animals at large law, but they're not peace officers. They have a very limited scope of what they can enforce.
So what background did you need to be?
I personally am not a commissioned officer. We have commissioned officers,
Okay.
and they have to go through special law enforcement training in order to be commissioned and carry a badge. Our particular way of doing that is usually partnering with a local agency. So we have people who are experts in the animal cruelty law, which unfortunately is in the ag and markets law. So a lot of police can't even find it because it's not in the penal code. So our officers go out and say to them, a regular police officer's looking at a situation with a dog and they don't know, does this cross the line of cruelty or not? Our officers can go and tell them. And what the vehicle allows us to do is bring the veterinarian to the scene, and she will have the equipment she needs to actually look at the animals on scene, collect evidence, and sort of triage those animals to get them where they need to go.
So we like to ask on the program before we wrap up
Yep.
about who the guest is that we have on the show, not
Okay.
just about your organization. Did we cover most about your organization, most of the issues?
Sure, yeah, I think
Okay.
so. Yeah.
So tell us about you. I mean,
Me.
you grew up in New York City.
I grew up in New York City in
Manhattan.
Chelsea. Yeah,
In Manhattan,
yeah,
Chelsea.
and Chelsea, not the way Chelsea is now. It was just regular middle class neighborhood.
Okay.
So yeah, grew up in Chelsea and grew up. We always had little animals like you can have in the house, the hamsters and gerbils and guinea pigs and small dogs. So always loved animals. Had no idea that this kind of thing existed where you could run an animal shelter. I went to college in Colorado, in Boulder, and stayed out there where after college ended up running a couple of restaurants, and my heart wasn't in it, and I really wanted to do something that I felt was more impactful to the community and gave me a sense of doing something good and giving back. And this opportunity came up at the local Humane Society there, where they were trying to improve customer service. This was 20 years ago, sort of acknowledging that dogs don't adopt themselves. You have to you have to get people in the door to do it. And that was my background, working in restaurants, training for that.
It might be a little unsettling for people to know you went from a restaurant to when in Vietnam they had dog as a delicacy. But,
they were largely vegetarian. They were very health conscious and had good vegetarian options at both restaurants. So worked there for many years in different roles and worked my way up through those organizations, and then came to New York City and ran the shelter in Brooklyn.
Oh, you did?
Which is one of the largest. At that time, that shelter alone took in 30,000 animals a year.
Wow. That's
And then moved back to Boulder for a few years, then to Atlanta, where I was the operations director for the Atlanta Humane Society, which again is a very large organization, and then came here about 9 years ago.
Wow. How old are you now?
I am 46.
46.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you did a lot in a small, brief amount of time. So
Yeah.
that's great. So
And we've got more work to do.
you got more work to do. What's on your agenda to do more? What do you hope to do?
We really want to expand our spay and neuter services, which is why last year we opened this facility up in Saratoga County, which is primarily a spay and neuter facility. We see a lot of animals coming from the North Country where there's no facility like that to offer to people who don't have a lot of money. And we want to get more into the neighborhood. So one of the things we'll use this vehicle for that the DA bought is we're going to start doing vaccine clinics, microchip clinics. We'll bring that out to low-income neighborhoods, offer those vaccines at little or no cost, and reach out to people about spaying or neutering their pets and find out what other needs they have. Because I think people have this strong attachment to their pets, and when their pets aren't taken care of, it's a source of serious stress. When you don't have a lot of money, you have all sorts of stresses. And if we can take care of the pets that people really care about, it makes the family and the community stronger.
And do you have to use the van in Albany County since it was given to you by the Albany County DA?
No, I think we can take it outside the county. I think he's okay with that, but.
Alarms and bells don't go off?
Yeah, nothing happens. It does have lights and sirens, so we can use those if we want to, but we'll use some restraint.
All right, very good. Listen, you're doing great work over here with animals. Like I say, it's a little bit God's work in Judaism also, taking care of the animals. And continue your good work with good success and good health.
Best of success.
Thank
yes.
you.